So welcome to my workshop called Writing a Compelling Proposal. So in case you didn't see me last week at the qualitative research workshop, my name is Erik. I am senior lecturer of the Division of Languages and Communication. And my research area is actually academic writing. So that's why I'm here sharing a little bit about writing proposals with you. And after this workshop, I've also got another writing workshop for you when you are about to write your final report in around week 7 to week 8. So alongside this workshop, actually, I've got a writing guide with you. I'm sure you already have had the IS student workbook, handbook, detailing all the logistic details like the structure of your proposal and the recommended structure for your final reports and what you need to do in each part of your report. And this is especially for all of you. That includes something like the language guides, the language that you can use. And it's also for social sciences students as well as business students. So I hope that it will be useful. But I'm not going to have a hard copy because of environmental reasons. So it's also nice that you have had your electronic devices with you. In that, you can now scan the QR code right here to get the e-version of this writing guide. Hi. So can you please sit in the front so that I don't have to shout, so that you can't hide? Yeah. Well, I take your time. Take your time. So you being in the front, that doesn't mean I will ask you questions. So don't worry. Okay, I'll take my time. But thank you so much for spending your evening with me, 1 hour and a half. I'll make sure I don't overrun, because for those of you who have ever been in my class, I am very talkative. I can go on hours and hours. So stop me if you feel like going. So now, if you have your devices with you, you can scan the QR code to get a writing guide for your proposals. And I would like to thank my RA, Sylvia, for designing this guide. The content is mine, but she's responsible for the very beautiful design of the material. And some activities that we are doing today will be centered upon this guide. So if you can't access the writing guide, let me know. I'll send you a copy after that, or I'll ask Kenneth to send you a copy. Right? And I'm sure all of you would ask, Erik, 會唔會有一個PowerPoint 去 send 返俾我哋? Do we have a PowerPoint sent back to you after the workshop? You don't have to wait until the end of the workshop. So download the writing guide first, and then you can also download this PowerPoint presentation for this, especially for this workshop and especially for all of you. Okay, so let me give you a couple of minutes to, a couple of seconds to scan the QR code to get the PowerPoint slides. So in terms of an evening workshop, not bad. I didn't expect to be doing this in a lecture theatre. So the agenda is rather straightforward. So based on what you have received from Kenneth, The first part will be about, very quickly, about structuring a proposal logically, the flow of a proposal, what you should include. So that's something I can, I can boast about, I can show off to you guys, because over the years I served here, I've written a few proposals and I got funding. And basically I've got 1 million Hong Kong dollars for 2 projects. And this workshop is a part of my project. So you guys are my guinea pigs. Thank you. So I am at the legitimate position to talk about how we are going to write proposals. And number 2, I'm sure some of you did ask the question during the workshop last week. So is there anyone of you here attended the workshop last week about qualitative research workshop? Okay. And I guess you have a rough idea of what to do with your research. And I'm going to share with you how I think about planning a research study. And the main dish for today would be about the language side. So you know what to do regarding your research, right? You have already decided on the topic, haven't you? Okay, not yet. But deadlines are looming. You know you have to hand in your proposal next week. And I guess you too, right? On the 9th, I heard. So we'll talk about, you know your stuff already, you know your research already, but how are you going to sell it is another matter. So for those of you who was in my marketing writing course, you already know how to promote your products. But what about an academic research? How do you promote your research? How do you sell your research? It's quite another thing. So this will be our focus today. Okay, so part 1, structuring a proposal. Oh, not yet. So a quick question for you. Why do we need to write a proposal? Aside from being a part of the assessment, aside from getting a grade, why do we write a proposal? Yeah, telling your supervisor what you're gonna do. Just that? What your plan is, right? But you didn't mention the main part. You can talk about structure, you can talk about details, but the most important thing is the supervisor has to be sold by to your idea. You don't just simply tell him a story. You don't just simply tell him about what you're gonna do, because to him or to her, so what, right? 係咪啊？做完個 research 之後咁啊點啊？ Okay, so you have to explain something, and that something would be, first of all, you survey the literature to highlight why your research is relevant to the field of research. So I'm sure some of you guys are from Chinese language and culture. Some of you are from BST. Some of you are from LPC. Some of you are from business. Some of you are from social sciences. In your field, what is important? Okay, for example, for language, my field is language studies, academic writing in particular. What is important in my field is, after analyzing your academic writing, how do my research studies inform education? So this is the importance. This is the relevance. So you aren't doing something not relevant to your field, right? Even if Tony, you're doing like music research, for example, eventually you are still linking your research to language studies in general. Okay, so that's one part. Second part, you're actually right, and I'm actually hungry. Thanks to it smells really good. You have to outline a research plan. You have to give some brief details in the proposal. So it depends on the scale of your project. For example, if I'm doing a 2-year project, the plan has to be very elaborate. Okay, but according to your time frame, you're going to finish your research in how many months? Like 2 months' time. So The time frame is going to be in weeks. So how are you going to outline it in order to tell your supervisor that it shall work? For example, if you're not a statistic guy, you can't do math, just like your teacher, me. That's why I'm teaching English, by the way. You aren't telling your supervisor, oh, I'm going to do big data research because it sounds grand, right? And I'm going to collect 1 million data points and I'm going to analyze it by hand, in manual coding, for example. But this won't be feasible. So that's what we mean by feasibility, 可行性, right? If you only have 2 months and you're going to do a big scale project, it's not going to be possible. So you have to narrow your scope a little bit. So I'm going to explain that. Number 3, in a proposal, you also need to outline or predict what you're going to get from the analysis. Okay? And how you're going to do that? For example, you have read some literature about a similar research study. And then there are details, there are outcomes, there are findings, there are results. Then you will predict whether your research will generate a similar set of results. Okay? So that's what you have to do. You have to look forward. You have to predict the outcomes so that you can highlight what you contribute to the field, what kind of impact you are giving to the field. So don't tell me, well, I'm only an undergraduate student. I'm not going to make any impact in the field. Don't say that, because we do have some classmates, some of your classmates previously contributed by going to conferences, presenting their papers. So that's possible. You can make a change. Some of them were doing like Cantonese studies. Some of them are doing like social linguistic studies. And some of them are even going to do the master's degrees. So you can make an impact. And all these things combined, eventually, that's the main part. That's the main thing. You need to get your research approved. Your supervisor has to set go, right? And just like me, I need to do all the 3 things in order to get that $1 million. And you would tell me how you are doing a proposal. Writing a proposal is pretty much like writing an essay. It's pretty much like writing a research article. It's just that some details are different. But of course, you can always go back to the IS handbook. So the title, of course, you need a title. And according to your handbook, I'm not sure whether it's necessary to have an abstract. An abstract is a summary of everything in your proposal. Okay? In business reports, it's something that we call an executive summary. But I can cross it out for now, because what we're going to focus on would be introduction, how you're going to introduce your topic. So that's obvious. So we're not going to delve into that for now. And then methods, something that you know in the first place what you want to do. So my advice is always, got me. We always start from the middle first. When we write research proposals, when we write research papers, we always start from the middle. Start from what we know first. Because when you write an introduction first, very likely you're going to change the introduction. And 2, you will get stuck thinking about how to write an introduction. So that's what I mean. You draft the methods first. And I'll briefly talk about how you are going to plan your methods section. And then, in the proposal, we don't have results yet, right? So we change that a little bit. So we will change that into expected results. or findings. What you may find from your research, from a research study. Okay? And I would say, when you are writing your final report, do these two things first and go back to the introduction and discussion sections. Because you need to have results in order to discuss something, in order to discuss the contributions of your research, in order to give your insights into the research. So maybe it's insights, maybe it's implications. So that means a conclusion or a discussion section is not just a summary of your research or your proposal or your report. You must add something in order to answer that so what question. Yeah, you can say, I'm doing this grand research, I'm doing this grand project. But without a good reason, without answering that so what question, it is not a good research at all. Okay? Out there are millions of research projects working on, meaningless things. So how are you going to make an impact? How are you going to, well, we are not asking you to save the world, but at least you do something to save your grades. And then, of course, you go back to the introduction. And then at the end, you may not have to do anything about acknowledgements yet. But of course, don't forget to cite your literature. Make a reference list of all the references that you have cited in your proposal. And very likely when you write your final report, it's going to be structured quite similarly to this shape. We call this an hourglass model proposed by John Swales. We are still using it right now. Oh, I guess you guys are still jotting notes. Okay. So how to develop a feasible research plan? So last week, we already talked about qualitative research methods or approaches. And we also mentioned the basic research processes. For those of you who didn't join us last week, just a quick recap of the process. For any research that you are doing, you must start with a question in your mind. Okay, whether you are doing data, I mean, whether you're doing data analysis, whether you're doing like quantitative analysis or qualitative analysis, the first thing that you ask is a question. Whether it's a hypothesis, whether it's a question, whether it's a social problem, a language problem, or a phenomenon you want to explain. Phenomenon, again, yin zheng, right? So that's why at the end of the previous workshop, I asked you to stay curious about the things around you. The second thing you do is to develop your research questions, what you're going to answer through your study. And then you plan within the scope of like a 2 months time, how much you want to achieve in your research. And then you go collecting data at what we call a research site. Maybe in our case, in my case, my research site is here, is the school. Maybe if you have different research questions or different research problems, you will reach out beyond the school. You will go back home, you will go on the street, you can ask questions to people that you have never met. Okay. So that's what we do. And then we prepare the data so we don't go straight into analyzing the data that you have collected. You have to process the data first. You have to clean the data first. For example, if you interview people, I like interviewing people, I like talking with people. But then after interviewing people, you have recordings and you have to turn it into words. That's what Nancy did for me in my project. And after we call this transcribing. After turning words, spoken words into written words, you have to unify the format, for example. That's what we mean by formatting, cleaning, and organizing the data. And after that, do you analyze the data using particular theoretical concepts that you have learned? Maybe discourse analysis tools. I guess some of you have attended the course called Analyzing English Grammar for language students. So you know there are some frameworks. For business students, you know you have your frameworks to analyze the data. For social sciences students back there, if you're dealing with data, if you're dealing with numbers, you have the SPSS package. And during lunch, we just talked about independent variables, dependent variables, what they are. I don't know. I don't care. Not my thing. But yeah, I think next week we are going to have another round of workshops on quantitative research methods by another colleague who is good at numbers. Okay, after analyzing the data, you will discuss the findings. Remember, data is different from findings. Data is often messy. Data is often disorganized. But then after analyses, you have findings. Findings are more organized and they come in patterns. Okay? Life is all about patterns. Some repeating patterns, something that you can predict, something that you can observe. If the world is messy, if the world is not organized, it's very hard to observe. But through analyses, we will have findings, we will find patterns out of it. And you make sense of the pattern by discussing what the patterns mean. A good example of patterns is weather, seasons, and climate. Okay? The everyday temperature, the everyday humidity is the data. But when you collect the data over a period of time, and when you observe it, you know that during December, usually we have more cooler days than the warmer days. So that's the pattern. And then we figure out, during December to February, usually the weather is cold, is cooler than expected than other months. And we call this winter. The ability to predict patterns, to observe patterns is what human beings are good at. We are very good at predicting patterns. We are very good at observing patterns. Otherwise, you won't be able to communicate with your friends because every conversation has a pattern. Every transaction that you have, for example, like if we are doing language studies, everything has a pattern. Every conversation has a pattern. When you go to the shop, when you go to the supermarket, the first thing that you get asked is, "有冇要啊?" Right? 有冇袋? Something like that. You can predict. Every time you go to the supermarket, the first thing that you get asked is, 有冇要?有冇要上錢? Right? And then the final thing that you do is to report. what you have found from your analyses. Okay. A couple of years ago, in every June, we do have an internal conference, having a few colleagues sharing their findings from research. So one of our colleagues did a very interesting study about 譚仔話. So 譚仔話 has a pattern, right? I'm not going to demonstrate. But anyway. So some basic considerations that you may want to think about, not in a particular order, because I always ask our students, my students, how much time do you have? Okay, in comparison with a 2-month study and a 2-year study, the scope can be very different. It can vary. I have a PhD friend at CUHK doing music studies. So literally music studies. So he goes to live shows all the time with a recorder with him. So he has plenty of time. He has 4 years. So he can do all the things that he wants to. He can record the live shows. He can interview people. He can accumulate data, a large amount of data, and then he processes it in his 4 years of study. Again, you only have 2 months or even less. So with the 2 months, you have to think about what do you want to solve. Okay? If you're going to save the world, 2 months is not enough. Okay? So generally, I mean, even a 2-year study like mine, I only ask myself 3 research questions. Maximum. 3 research questions. What do you want to find? What do you want to see from your studies? And then number 2, I wish he came in. I'm sure he or she regrets now for missing what I'm going to talk about. What paradigm will you choose for examining your data? Paradigm is a technical term, a term for research methodology. So basically, a paradigm is a frame that you use to look at the world. Well, even if you, let me write it on the board. I can write Chinese now. I guess you guys are already hungry, right? Fan is the color of the rice, right? I never thought about that though. Yes. Well, we can survive pretty well without going to school. I'm sure you agree with that. Not sure whether I should say this because it's been recorded. But as long as you guys are here, you are given some sort of a frame to look at the world, right? So there are 2 main frames. One frame is the world only has one reality, and it can be found out through numbers. You sort out something, you do a survey, and you get the numbers. So that is what we mean by truth, right? But sometimes there are things that you can't measure, like happiness, like boredom. I can only guess how bored you are right now from whether you are yawning, whether you are dozing off, or whether you look interested. So the second frame would be we ask questions to make sure we get as many reflections as possible, so that the second frame is there are multiple realities in the world. And the reality is based on different people's perspective. Okay? So when you are Thinking about how to solve your research questions, you might want to think about, come in, or you are gonna. So you want to think about whether I want to solve problems through numbers, or whether I would want to solve problems through digging deep. Okay? Digging deep. So maybe you would ask, how many people I should interview in order to get a representative picture of my research, for my research? How many? 100? 1,000? 1 million? So that depends on what you want to ask. For example, like last week, I talked about qualitative researchers always ask how's and why. If I want to know why you do something, I would ask you, and I will go after you for months in order to trace your behavior. So even one subject can be used for doing a research, depending on what kind of research question that you want to address. If you want to get a general picture about the school, for example, if you want to know about how your classmates use AI, use ChatGPT to do their homework, it's not possible to say, I did, but I'm not going to tell you. So it's not possible to just ask one student and then when she said, I'm only using it for 30 minutes a day. And then you make a bold claim by saying that, speed students use 30 ChatGPT for 30 seconds every day in general. You can't say that. You can't make a sweeping claim. And in that case, you have to broaden your research sample. You get as much data as possible. Okay. So the question is whether you want to go broad or you want to go deep. So for Chinese students, for example, I know some of you may consider doing a literature study. Okay, maybe focusing on just one work. Or maybe some of you who belong to translation, maybe you just want to focus on one text. That's perfectly fine. My PhD study only focused on 3 students, 6 texts, and I wrote 80,000 words, 8万字, just focusing on 6 texts. Okay? Again, after deciding what you want to address, you think about what data you will collect, whether it's written data, whether it's numerical data, whether it's spoken data. How many are you going to collect? And how are you going to collect it? Like if you have a recorder, you use a recorder. If you have Teams, you use Teams. If you like going to the library, you go to the library. There is one thing called library research. You can do a library research as well. After that, you think about, I have decided to focus just on just one text, or maybe 6 texts. And then I will choose a tool to help me analyze my data. So after considering these, in general, the flow of your methods section is something like this. After the introduction, you ask the questions. Maybe if you are doing quantitative analysis, you raise hypotheses, okay? Or maybe you would like to present the objectives of your research. Remember, when you check the dictionary, objectives may have some like similar words like aims, don't write them down yet, or goals. But I have to say, okay, the three words, objectives, aims, goals, sometimes in Chinese, they all are called 目標, 目的. But in terms of meaning, they are not the same. They are not the same. That's why direct translation can be risky at times. If you can't get these things right, these three words right, at some point you will lose focus of your research because you won't know what to do. Objectives means what you do in the project. For example, I analyze data, I collect data, I want to I find out something for a purpose. Okay, so it's more like objectives are actions or what we call means. Okay, 方法方式行動用行動做出嚟嘅，你要做出嚟嘅。In order to achieve some purposes. So aims are more like smaller goals. For example, sometimes one research question may answer one aim, may fulfill one aim. When you answer one research question, you answer one aim, okay? A smaller goal. And goal is more like the overall aim of the whole project. For example, if you want to know more about human beings in terms of how they use internet language, so that's a higher goal. And smaller aims would lead to the higher goal. So these are the differences. Okay. Again, objectives are the means to reach the ends, the goals. So don't mix them up. After stating the research questions, you can describe your research site. Where is the data? What is the context of your study? You may want to explain, the research, the present study is situated at Speed, PolyU. And you describe the details of the research site. For example, sometimes when I do case studies, the research site may be as specific as a marketing writing class. So that would be a specific research site in which you collect data. And then you moved on to talk about how you collect data, what sort of data you collect, the amount of the data. For example, if you interview 5 students, 5 classmates, you give some profile, you give a profile about the students. So what is their name? Usually we don't put the real names on the research articles or research proposals. We usually give them a pseudonym, 假名, okay, in order to protect the privacy of the participants. Okay, what is he or she studying, and what you are collecting, etc., etc. If you're collecting text data like students' essays, how many words are there in the text? Or if you are translating a piece of work, how many words are there in the text? And how you're going to prepare it, and then you talk about how you're going to analyze the data with the theoretical framework or the analytical framework that you have chosen. So generally, in a small scale study, you only use one theoretical model to analyze the data. Very rarely, we use more than one model. because we lose focus if we use more than one. For example, if you have decided to do a discourse analysis, a text analysis by studying grammar, let's say I'm only going to focus on verbs, okay? You're not going to say, oh, aside from this, I'm going to use another theoretical model. I am going to use my common sense to analyze this piece of text. Okay, remember, choose your theory before you start doing the analysis. And it's also a good idea that you visualize your research plan. Maybe you can include it in the proposal. Maybe you can just keep it to yourself. I'm going to give you one example. This is called a Gantt chart. So this is the Gantt chart of my research proposal that I've just submitted today. So it's a 3-year study, and my timeline is determined by months, by the matter of months. So it's 36 months, from January 2025 to December 2027. And my research project involves 3 studies. And then you can see, in each study, I will detail what I'm going to do. If we focus on study 1, let's just focus on study 1. So I would say I will set up questionnaire, adopting basic psychological needs satisfaction, and teaching classroom interaction competence scales, things like that. So you don't have to care about what all these means. And then in March to May, I will disseminate questionnaires via a platform called Prolific, and I'll also use a snowball sampling method. And then we'll use 2 months to analyze the questionnaire data, and then we'll report it. Okay. And so we'll use some time to attend conferences and submit research articles and so on and so forth. Yeah, so on and so forth. In your case, your research timeline is, again, by weeks or even by days. So you can have a very detailed research plan. I'm sure your supervisor would want to have something simpler. Okay, so determine your research plan by the matter of weeks, and that will be clearer. Clearer for you and clearer for your supervisor, so that your supervisor can give you very specific instructions or advice on whether you will need more time on a particular part, or whether you only need like 1 week or even shorter for some parts. Okay, so Gantt chart. So far, so good, huh? The next part, and I said it's the main dish of the whole workshop, is that, okay, you have some good research ideas, and you know it's important. You know this project is going to save the world, aside from getting an A grade. But how am I going to say it? How I'm going to write it? Especially, it's in English. You come here to this workshop because I'm quite sure you're going to write your proposals in English, or your final report in English. I know there is an option that you can write your proposals and your report in Chinese, but you have chosen the harder way, and I give you that. I appreciate that. So one big advice for you is you start persuading right in the introduction. So this is the assumption, with the assumption that you have already done the methods part, you have already done the expected outcomes part, and then you are now currently at the introduction section. You're going to think about what to do with your introduction. So quick question. What is an introduction for a proposal? What do you have to introduce? Introduce myself? Ladies and gentlemen, I am William. Yeah, number one, the objective you want to achieve in your project. Number two, sorry, the background. You have to introduce the background of the research. And one more, what materials you have just prepared? Maybe we'll leave that part in the methods session. Yeah, but good try. But good try. And your answer is quite like Tony's answer that you express or you describe the objectives of the research, what you're going to do in your proposal. So let me show you. As an introduction, of course, it serves to introduce. It introduces why your study is important in a broader context. For example, you are going to study a particular kind of behavior on the internet, like trolling. I know some of you guys are very good at it on threads. But after studying the phenomenon of trolling, how does your research going to contribute in the broader context, like internet conversation or internet discourse in general? So what number one, you have to contextualize, you have to put your study with the background, with a broader background. Number two, you have to briefly talk about the literature, okay? The research literature, the articles, the book chapters, to show that not just that you have read a lot of papers, but also to show that your study is related to your field. For example, if you're going to write about something related to sociolinguistics, your study has to relate with sociolinguistic studies. Maybe you would argue, I'm going to break some grounds by doing some original research no one has ever done before. But there are two risks by saying that. I'm not saying you can't. You can obviously do something original for your research because that's what we are looking for, some originality in your research. But if you look through the whole bunch of literature and you find that no one has ever done that, it's very hard to justify why your research is important. Okay? Sometimes, well, we see that not many people have done this research, or nobody has done this research. Number one, it may be a research gap. It may be a gold mine for you, but it also could mean no one cares about that part of the research. So you have to think carefully why no one has done that research study before. Okay? And after doing that part of literature, a little literature review, and you end the introduction by introducing your proposal, how you're going to organize the rest of your proposal. And that's what Tony meant by the objectives. So you are going to list out the objectives, what you're going to present later on in the proposal. But there's always a but, I know. The term introduction does not serve the best purpose of what an introduction does. Aside from introducing the topic, aside from introducing how you are, your study is related with the research field, it's also a site of persuasion. Okay, because it starts the whole proposal. And if the introduction is not attractive, your reader loses interest. Your supervisor gives you a B grade. I'm sure you guys want an A. and Asians don't like beef, right? Asians only want A's, I know. So you have to persuade. But how do we persuade? How do we persuade, by the way? Please let me do it, right? Is that what we do? How do we persuade? How do we attract? How do we sell? Drawing on your marketing writing knowledge. If during lunch with Leanne and Jerome today, we talked about when we go to the exam, we have a cheat sheet, right? And remember, we have the cheat sheet. The moment you gave away your cheat sheet to Erik is when you have forgotten everything about the subject. Understand that? So instead of asking you for something very abstract, why don't we have a look at this example? Okay, this example was from one of your classmates in the previous cohort. So let's read it very quickly together. Writing trends associated with social media have been found in academic discourse. Social media-based elements such as abbreviations, emoticons, are associated with building blocks of language. And these elements are known as textisms, as they are the derivatives of literary components used on digital platforms, including but not limited to So textese is a form of abbreviated written or typed language characterized by leaving out words, omission of words, and use of textisms such as abbreviation. A little bit of repetition right there. Similarly, textisms in social media are associated with everyday communication. So this is paragraph 1 of a proposal introduction. Can you tell me, so let me say, how do you feel about this introduction after reading this? Yeah, yeah. Don't forget, the background section is already integrated into the introduction. Yeah, it's a part of the introduction. Okay, so in terms of the placement of this paragraph in the introduction is okay, is correct, there's no problem with that. But as you read it, how do you feel about this paragraph? Is it exciting? It's not exciting, right? What is missing? Like, can't tell, right? But it's a feeling that it lacks some color, right? 係咪咁寫好似冇乜嘢講咗 you have been there and you have done that. It's a bit boring, yes. I didn't write this though. Yeah, so I'll tell the student. So let's look at this. It's a little bit small. As technology continues to dominate learning and communication in contemporary world, there is fear that students are likely to draw on sentence pattern, grammar, and there are findings showing that writing trends associated with social media have been infiltrating academic discourse, especially in writing citation, social media, and you have read that already. And then line 6, the elements are known as textisms as they are derivatives of literary components, Specifically, textese is a form of abbreviated written language characterized by omission, and similarly, textism in social media associated with negatively impacting everyday communication citations. As such, social media affects both knowledge, language learning skills, and communication, which elucidates the concept or the statement that it can degrade the quality of communication within and outside of pedagogical settings. Pedagogical means teaching and learning. So how is this version different from the previous one? You have references. I thought you were going to say it's longer. you have citations. You have some quote. Not no quotes yet, because if you have quotes, you should have the quotation marks. But good try. Yes, and I think it's a good idea when you write your proposals, when you write your introduction sections. It's also quite good to introduce some quotes, some exact quotes from readings. What else? What else are there? Okay, so it's more connected to the broader context of the social phenomenon and things like that. What else? Let me give you one more try. How is it different from in terms of word choice, in terms of language? They both are correct. They both are perfectly grammatical. Aside from being a little bit repetitive, but how is it different from the previous sample? Sorry? The tone of the language, very good. This is what I'm going to show you. First of all, the writer expresses their attitude, like the words that I have highlighted in, is it purple? Yeah, purple. You have dominate, 壟斷, right? There's something slightly negative right here. And there is fear that students are likely to draw. Fear, something negative. So now you know this passage, is it about something positive? Is it something about something negative? Yeah, it's going to be about a problem that you are going to address. Okay, maybe it looks dry in the middle because there are lots of explanations of concepts, of paraphrasing references. But as soon as you start your paragraph with an attitude, okay, you don't have to say, I think. You don't have to say, I believe. This is already representing your attitude towards the topic. So social media language is a little bit negative because students are going to use it in their essay. So that's not good, right? And you can see some verbs right here in the middle. Infiltrating. It means it goes into your life creepily. Okay? It creeps in your life silently, impacting you negatively. So you can see negatively impacting. Impact as a verb or as a noun is neutral. 影響其實係可以係正面，可以係反面嘅，right? It can be positive, it can be negative. But because of the word that you choose right at the beginning of your introduction, it already gives you an idea. It gives you a sense that the impact is negative. Okay? And finally, the very final sentence, the use of social media discourse in academic writing can degrade the quality of communication. Degrade, 即係 downgrade 咁解。Okay? So number one, showing attitude. 中高啦。Number two, you guys are correct about finding references. Yes. Aside from showing attitude, you need to find evidence to support your attitude. This is what we mean by showing, not telling. You can tell, I think this problem is serious. But if there is no proof, if there is no evidence, you're going to be in trouble. Okay? So it's not uncommon to find like references, citations in the introduction. And number three, the cause and effect relations are clearly set. So aside from because, aside from therefore, this writer has used quite a few different strategies. Like as technology continues, it gives a reason, it gives a background to what the fear is about. Okay? So it is grammatically perfect if you delete the first line. You may just say, there is fear that students are likely to draw. But if you can add some details with a reason, okay, as technology continues to dominate learning and teaching in a contemporary world, it helps the reader, it helps your teacher to understand, what kind of context you're trying to put your study in. And then you have consequently impacting, you have you have verbs such as associated with, and these are different ways to talk about cause and effect. If you are a logical person, I'm sure you are, you can be persuasive by reasoning. And this is what we mean by reasoning. 講道理嘅人咧，對於因果關係好清楚嘅。They are very clear about cause and effect. They don't just simply blow water. 唔係就係吹水。They don't just simply bluff. 吹水 bluff, not really blowing water. Okay. So the idea, when you put everything together, think about the function of an introduction. So you start to set the tone right at the beginning of the text. And similarly, when you write paragraphs, the topic sentence should also do the same work. So in the introductory paragraph, you set the tone right at the beginning. Okay, the first sentence already gives you a rough idea about, okay, I guess the writer is going to problematize the issue. This is not right. Okay. And then as you travel along the text, you may find that the concluding sentence also has a value that echoes the topic sentence. So that means when you write concluding sentences, you don't just simply repeat what you have said in the introduction. You wrap up everything that you have said in the middle of your paragraph, and then you find a way to wrap it up. So the main message is social media will degrade the quality of communication. That's the stance of the writer. 呢個就係嗰個作者嗰個立場啦。And you will find that the tone actually flows back to the text. So it goes both ways. You can set the tone at the beginning so as to let the tone travel across the paragraph. And at the same time, if you put something at the end of the paragraph, your stance, your 立場, it travels back to wrap things up. So it completes the picture. And you guys are very happy about 立場. Of course, something that you should have when you are proposing your study. Okay? Quickly wrapping up this part. So to write persuasively, 4 points. You use evidence, of course. You use evaluative language. You show the attitude. But you don't say, I think. You don't say, I agree. You set the tone right at the beginning and at the end. Okay? And don't forget to link all these logically throughout paragraphs or within the paragraphs. If you can write a logical paragraph, basically you can adopt the same pattern throughout the whole proposal, throughout the whole text. So I'm just wondering what I'm going to tell you in the report writing workshop, because I've already given you the most important messages about writing persuasively. So I'll think about something else for later. Okay? And by evaluative words, commonly they are adjectives. And I'm sure you know what adjectives are, right? They are usually put before nouns 形容詞，多數擺喺名詞前面嘅。中文都係嘅，中文都係嘅，英文都係嘅，of course. So these adjectives can describe things positively and negatively. Words such as good or bad, important or not important, but long or short, not so much, because long does not mean good, short does not mean bad. Okay, thick does not mean good, thin does not mean bad. Okay, but you know the broad picture, especially for academic research. What is important? What is relevant? What is significant? Okay, so that's why typically we use like adjectives to describe emotions: happy, not happy, bored, interested. But you can also judge behavior, like Erik is boring, I know, and maybe the participants are very immoral, 唔道德嘅, unethical, and so on. Or maybe you can describe the quality of things. This is a beautiful bottle. This is a wonderful research. So maybe you can use adjectives to describe concrete things, like physical things, like a bottle of water or a can of Coke. But you can also describe abstract things like happiness, or even your research or different phenomena using adjectives. And one good reminder is that typically in academic writing, we don't talk about ourselves. We don't talk about emotions. Unless you are describing your participants. If you're going to interview people and then you are describing their emotions, fine, but you don't talk about your own emotions. You don't say, I do this research because I'm interested in it. There must be better reasons, right? The common combination you can find in good writing is that there are common combinations, there are common ways to make sure your paragraphs, your words, sorry, your proposals are colored in the value that you want to show. So you may use an adjective before an abstract noun. So having said that, aside from talking about the introduction, don't forget to persuade in the conclusion. Because your conclusion should describe the expected outcomes, showing how rigorous your study is. Rigorous means 嚴謹, okay, is well planned, is well implemented. When you can predict, when you can foresee what findings you can get from your research, it means you have done your homework very well, very carefully. 2, aside from suggesting the results that you can expect, you also talk about so what, right? So you have worked so hard describing your work, okay, showing all you want to do to your supervisor, but then so what? Are you going to save the world? Are you going to solve the problems? So it's a chance for you to evaluate your study in a positive light. So what you are going to contribute to the field. Okay, for translation students, how you're going to contribute to translation. For bilingual communication, how you're going to improve business communication, for example. For Chinese culture, how you're going to preserve Chinese culture. These are contributions. And your research, to a certain extent, should have impact. Whether you want it or not, there should be some impact. But how are you going to write it out? How are you going to express it? So let's see another example from a conclusion. Yeah, from your classmates. The impact of social media will increase in the contemporary pedagogy because it provides educators and learners with the means of sharing information and learning from each other. As such, this study will add knowledge and perspectives regarding social media and language skills across diverse discourse in education. Researching the impact of social media on language proficiency has reasons. In today's world, more and more people are using social media platforms to communicate, and it can have an effect on language proficiency. Again, any problems with a conclusion like this? Again, it's perfectly grammatical. I will give him or her an A- for this. Anything that you don't feel like about this conclusion, aside from it being too short? Uh, True, but at times when you are wrapping up your research, you don't add new references sometimes. But if you want to discuss your findings in the introduction, sometimes you may add references, but this is true. This is something that we can do. We don't have much time, so I'm going to show you this. It is lengthened a little bit, but I add the evaluative words. So can you quickly tell me what these words are? Some of them are very advanced. Some of them I may not have seen before. Sometimes I don't use those words. For example, the impact of social media will become in the contemporary pedagogy. So yeah, ubiquitous. How do you spell ubiquitous? What does it mean by ubiquitous? So, many or very immense, very important, very relevant. Okay, so you may replace this with other words. Okay, line 3. This study is important. Yes, that's right. As it will add what perspective? Insightful perspectives. Have you already got the answer? No. Good. Regarding the potential, really, imagination, really, something more, yeah, implications, something more realistic, okay, than imagination. But good try though. Implications. Implications means 啟示或者係some potential contributions. Okay, and a language proficiency is CRU what? Crucials. Crucial is one level up than important. That's right. And then it can have significance. That's right. So these are all the words that you may want to learn in order to persuade, in order to show your attitude. And then language proficiency is essential. That's rather straightforward, right? Yeah, essential. And last one, how to prepare. How to what prepare? Best prepare. That's right. Fantastic. So you guys are really good at like filling the blanks. Right. So a quick edit would be something like this. And aside from these evaluative words, we can also see a very good link of a logical flow. You have because. I'm not saying that you can't use because, but you can use it sparingly. You can use different versions of like cause and effect expressions. You can say as such, you can say therefore, you can say as a result, and then you can say a variety of reasons, and then you give reasons. And sometimes don't forget the very final sentence of a paragraph should also be something like a conclusion, something like a cause and effect. So after saying all these things in the paragraph, okay, so you always need that final comment. Therefore, and then you may also see I have colored the evaluative word ubiquitous at the beginning of the paragraph, and you can see the tone is set already at the beginning of the conclusion paragraph. And then it travels all the way to the bottom, echoing each other. So when you spend time on writing your proposals or your reports, make sure you draft your proposals as soon as you can, so that you can leave some time for drafting these things to sell your proposal to your supervisors. Okay, so these are not the only way to persuade. I mean, if you don't have good examples, if you don't have good evidence, but you only use these words in your proposal, it's empty. Good writing does not mean good proposal. Okay, still, you need the content, you need the meat of the proposal. You need to serve the purpose of what a proposal is. So we talk a lot about ChatGPT, right? So when you ask ChatGPT to generate an essay for you, they are very good at using these words. I can even prompt ChatGPT to use particular words to generate a text for you. But remember, sometimes they don't have the content that you know. Like the examples, like the real life examples. ChatGPT essays, ChatGPT texts are not real. But what I'm going to show you today, before we end this session, I'm going to show you a database that has many real life language data that you can use for your language study or even helping you with your writing. So anyone who has been to my workshops before will know what I'm talking about. So this slide includes some basic evaluative words with combinations. For example, you can talk about importance of your study, like important, essential, significant, crucial, vital, necessary, key, major, and things like that. And coming with the combination, you have the abstract nouns like part, factor, role, and so on. These things that you can use. And aside from that, you have relevance, like relevant, related, unique, valid, effective, practical. You can say a practical context, relevant dimension. Influence. So how influential your study is going to be. Like, is it pervasive? Is the context pervasive? Is the phenomenon pervasive? Is it universal? Is it prevalent? So now you have the choices. But how am I sure the combinations are right? So do we have like a relevant dimension or effective dimension? So we don't know yet. So that's the problem of learning a language, learning a new language. It's easy to learn vocabulary. Okay, you can boast to your parents, today I've learned 10 new adjectives. And today I have learned, or this month I've learned 100 new words. But how am I going to use it? So how do I know what words follow the keywords I've learned? So for language students, for all of you who are learning how to write in English, so you may want to use some tools beyond using dictionaries, because dictionaries may not have the examples that you want. So there's a way to observe how language is used naturally and authentically through language databases called corpora. Corpora, so we have the word root means body. So you have corporate, means a body of people. You have corpse, 屍體, also body. The corpus is a body of text. It's a database of text that you can search. And nowadays we have these corpora on the internet. So I'm introducing a tool for you guys. It's called SKELL. SKELL in full is sketch engine for language learning with 3 functions. One examples. You can search how a phrase or how a word is used by real speakers or real writers of English. And you can also check what words go with the keyword that you search. For example, important, what comes after important? Okay, and sometimes we call this collocation. The technical term is 詞語搭配 collocation. And number 3, I know you all use thesauri, 同義詞詞典, but this platform also has a thesaurus, checking what words you can use as synonyms or similar words to the keyword. So for those of you who have already got my PDF, you know there is a link that you can check. You can scan it, you can tap on the link and go to have a look, and I will demonstrate for you. We have a few minutes. So you can access the website first, you can scan the QR code, and then on the next slide, we have some questions of how you can use the platform for searching the right way to use the vocabulary. You can scan the QR code on the screen. Right. So I'm going to switch the screen to, oops, yeah. So this is the desktop version of the platform. So this shows a very basic interface, and you can also see my face as well. So for example, if you are typing if you want to know what comes after or what comes before the abstract noun issue, when you type issue, you have 3 choices. Either you can check examples, you can check the collocation, you can check similar words. For example, if you click on examples, you will have examples like this letter issue has never been resolved, some domestic issues like number 4, or this issue, those issues, business issue, and so on. And then if we go to word sketch, we can check what goes before issue or what goes after issue. For example, issues relevant to, or maybe we have what we call modifiers of issue, like health issues. That means in the database, what comes up frequently in the database is health issues. When you search issues, what comes up is health issues. Or important issue, key issue. So you can see a lot of evaluative words. Important, key, social, not social, major, serious, and you have a controversial, and so on. Okay? And then you can go to similar words to look at different similar words that you can use to replace issue, or those with similar meanings, but you have to choose whether they can be replaced by the other words. Like problem is a good word. And here you have what we call a word cloud. And with the words that are the biggest means it is the most similar to the original keyword issue. And true, we often use issue interchangeably with problems. And another function only on desktop version is that when you hover your mouse on problem, you can also see some examples with problem. We survive those problems. Second problem, we can also see what adjectives will come with problem, like acute problem, 嚴重嘅, severe, 嚴重嘅, solvable, 冇咁嚴重嘅. 解決到嘅 serious 都係嚴重嘅。Okay? So again, when you learn a new word, it's the most important that you know how to use the word. And sometimes checking dictionaries may not help because the examples are very limited. But when you go back to examples, there are at least 40 examples that you could choose from, you can refer to. And you can, maybe if you have time, you can figure out the patterns of how you can use these words. But one last thing for you, before we call it a day. I'm going to skip a few slides. So here we have one more example. And you can see there are words that I have highlighted in bold. And that means before the abstract noun, there should be an evaluative word that colors the passage in the right way. For example, in the vast landscape of cognitive skills, language stands as a what feature? Unique features. I know why you know. Yeah, because you are clever. But you can always go to the website. You can go to SKELL to check and offer what insights, key insights, important insights, valuable insights, and relationship. What relationship? As linguistic students, we must delve into the what between language use and our environment. Something similar, so we can check. Okay. Yes, I've already heard the answer. So relationship, and you can click word search, word sketch, and you can see not many choices right here. Like you can't say close relationship, not so close. Not you can't say romantic, sexual, intimate, personal. Well, not far from truth though. Like as they go along quite closely, but when you go all the way down to the bottom of the list, you have complex relationship. Okay, between language use and the environment. Right. So aside from unique, you can also choose other words such as distinctive. For valuable, insightful, you can use useful, you can use profound. So with the functions of SKELL, you can find the similar words that will suit the tone of your paragraph. Okay, so I will stop the recording for now because it's around the end of the workshop. And I will, share this recording